September 2019 Long Beach Expo World and Ancient Coins Signature Auction by Heritage largely delivered on its promise by realizing over $5.8 million in rare coins. In terms of the world coins on offer, let's open proceedings with a notable variety within the Canadian catalogue. The 1953 penny of the no shoulder fold variety is seen here. The place of interest for this coin is the Queen's shoulder, featuring a new design by Mary Gillick that was implemented following the Queen's coronation ceremony. It seems that the portrait was not executed to the sufficient relief as to ensure that all of the details would fully strike up. Particularly affected by this was the shoulder, where a fold, some may refer to it as a shoulder strap, on the Queen's dress would not appear. This detail would then be strengthened in later coins. PCGS graded this pristine example as SP67 Deep Cameo, and it sold for $1,860. So who doesn't love old-fashioned pirate treasure? Well, alright, not pirate treasure technically, but shipwreck treasure nonetheless. Although pirates do sort of enter the story in a bit. And of course, if you're going for shipwreck treasure, then you might as well go for one of the most infamous, the 1715 plate, or treasure fleet as it is more commonly known. In July of 1715, a fleet of 12 Spanish ships departed Cuba. En route to Spain, they were completely laden with gold, silver, precious jewels, as well as tobacco and various valuable spices. It became customary for these ships to travel in fleets, as it was considered to be safer than a single ship having to traverse pirate-infested waters. However, after only 7 days at sea, the fleet was caught in a devastating hurricane, and 11 of the 12 ships were sunk just off of the Florida coast. This gold cop coin was recovered from the scattered remains of that wreck. Graded by NGC as MS64, it sold at auction for $3,120. The gold mohur coins of the British East India Company are an interesting peculiarity within the Indian numismatic catalogue, as they were, by the very law that enacted them to be minted, not deemed as legal tender. Instead, they could be exchanged at the bank for a fixed exchange of 15 silver rupees, which were accepted as legal tender. Carrying forth a tradition started under the similar coins of William IV. The date of these coins were frozen as 1841. However, we do know that by the Type 2 obverse design with the divided legend, that the coin was struck in or after 1851 at the Calcutta Mint, as prior to that the continuous legend design was used. Graded by PCGS as MS62, this piece of British India history was sold for $5,040. A fairly unique and rare medal was also on display, entitled Protestants Supported in Belgium. The piece is dated 1587 and is in recognition of Queen Elizabeth's support for the Dutch revolt, in open defiance of Spain and its king Philip II. Spain would take its revenge on England 5 years later by supporting the Irish rebels in the 9 Years' War. It depicts the enthroned Elizabeth trampling a hydra under her feet, with Robert Dudley, the first Earl of Leicester, holding her robe, with allegorical representations of the United Provinces of the Dutch Republic surrounding them. The reverse in turn shows the Pope, cardinals, bishops and Catholic priests surrounded by implements of the sacrament, all of which are falling from grace. This large silver medal stands as an interesting relic of the Protestant Reformation and the political maneuverings that surrounded it during that age. This peculiar piece was sold for $5,280 at auction. A Scottish coin now from the reign of Mary I, better known as Mary Stuart or simply Mary, Queen of Scots, struck in 1553 when Mary was still only 11 years old and resident in France while Scotland was under the rule of a regent instead. Mary's story is a very well documented one and very widely known as well, especially compared to other contemporary monarchs. Perhaps what's best remembered was her rather sad demise, being under what was essentially amount to house arrest for nearly 18 years. She was accused of, tried, and convicted of plotting to assassinate Queen Elizabeth, who saw her as a potential rival to the English throne. She was then beheaded in 1587. The coin was authenticated by NGC with a grade of XF45 that saw it reach a closing price of $7,800 at auction. To anyone interested in French numismatics, especially the Napoleonic coins, this might be now presented here. This time, however, from the reign of Philip V, being minted only the year prior to its being sunk in 1714. This coin is curiously doubled in places, with the denomination of 8 escudo being most notably affected. The number of 8 is of course styled with Roman numerals, so VIII, but with the doubling, an additional I appears behind, making it technically 9 instead of 8, sort of. This reminds me, I mentioned pirates earlier. The reason for that is after the fleet was scuttled, a number of ships showed up to, let's say, aid in the salvage operation, a number of which were in fact reported as pirate ships. The current coin, however, was graded by NGC and received a grade of MS62. At auction, it managed to raise $19,200. Then we have one of the more famous coins from the Chinese Republic, despite it being relatively scarce as a whole today. Best known as the auto dollars due to the automobile that is featured on the reverse design, which I believe is a Model A Ford, but I could be mistaken there, so don't quote me on that. The coin stems from the Guizhou, or what is more commonly westernized as Kweichow province, and the car itself is said to have belonged to the region's governor, although calling Xiao Shichen governor is perhaps a bit generous. I mean, the man was a warlord, to be frank. Graded here by PCGS as XF40, the coin itself sold for $22,200 at auction. Then we have an exceptional rarity in the Cuban series, a 20 peso gold coin struck in the Philadelphia Mint around 1915. This is actually a part of a series of coins prepared, all conforming in both size and weight to the corresponding US coins of that period. Thusly, the 20 pesos piece was equivalent to the double eagle, with the entire set designed and dies engraved by Charles Barber. The coins are also of interest to specialist US collectors. Exact mintages, however, are not exactly certain, although reasonable estimates place it between 20 and maybe as many as 50 coins. Graded here by NGC as Proof 62 Cameo, the coin sold at auction for $37,200. These are the top 10 Lincoln penny coins to look for in pocket change. The first stop on our journey is in 1988, where we encounter a double-die obverse Lincoln cent, a fairly easy coin to identify as it is one of the very popular doubled ear varieties. As such, the main attribute for this coin is the clear doubling that can be found on the lower ear, where Lincoln appears to have an additional earlobe towards the south. These types of varieties are becoming a lot more popular with collectors, and values have also been increasing as a result. In 2020, a PCGS graded MS66 red example like this was sold at auction for $3,120. The next coin is from 1995, with the Denver Mint delivering a nice double-die obverse coin, the result of pivoted hub doubling with a nice counterclockwise rotation to be seen. Best spotted by looking at the letters of In God We Trust, where there is nice strong doubling on all of the letters towards the right, with the doubling growing more pronounced as you move closer to the word trust being doubled the strongest overall. There is also some minor doubling on the date and the mint mark as well, but this pales in comparison to the strong doubling that was discussed just a moment ago. 2019 saw the auction of a PCGS graded MS67 red example of this variety for $4,200. And then we have probably the rarest variety on this list, with only, I believe, 4 examples known to exist to date. This is a 1982 small date penny struck on a zinc planchet with a double die reverse variety. On this coin, you will notice some doubling on the letters of E pluribus unum, with the offset occurring towards the right, and thusly the doubling will be displayed to the left of the letters. There is also some doubling to be seen on the letters of United States of America, as well as the denomination of 1 cent. The clearest doubling, however, is seen on the O of 1 cent in this particular section. Due to how rare this coin is and the fact that it has only been discovered in 1997, it has yet to appear at public auction. However, its value is most often quoted if in the $1,000 to $2,000 range. I do feel, however, that this number is not quite reflective of current market conditions, and that a more realistic number would be closer to the $10,000 range, would one to appear at auction, depending on the grade of the specific coin, of course. But that is purely my opinion. Our next coin is the fourth of the various 1972 double die obverse examples that are known to exist. While the doubling is not nearly as strong as it would be on the main variety for this date, it is by far the scarcest of the lot and the most difficult to actually acquire. Doubling is clearest on this case in the letters of In God We Trust, and can be seen on the right of the letters in question. There is also some clear doubling on the lower parts of the base of the 2 within the date. In 2019, an MS66 red example graded and slabbed by PCGS was sold at auction for the sum of $4,230. We head back once more to 1995 for our next coin on this list, and this time though it is the double die obverse variety coin from the Philadelphia Mint that is up for discussion. On this coin there's some fair doubling on the In God We portion of In God We Trust, but the best doubling by far for this coin can be seen on the word Liberty. The letters are all doubled almost due north, with naturally the horizontal flat sections of the letters displaying this in the most dramatic manner, especially the B, E, and T. In 2017, a very attractive MS67 red PCGS graded coin like this was sold at auction for $5,052.50. Auction for the laudable sum of $11,456.25. And for the second runner-up, we looked at a coin, or well, technically a pair of coins from 1992. These are the 1992 Close AM Lincoln cents. You see, this technically is a transitional error, as a reverse die intended for use on 1993 coins was pressed into service too soon and paired with an obverse die from 1992 instead to create this variety. To identify this coin, simply examine the spacing between the A and the M of America. As you can see here, on the close AM variety, the base of the two letters should practically be touching one another, whereas on the normal, wide AM coin, there is a considerable gap comparable to the rest of the letters in the sequence as well. This close AM type exists both for the no mint mark Philadelphia issue coin as well as the 1992 D mint mark from the Denver Mint, which is why I said earlier that it's technically a pair of coins. But for the purposes of this list, I decided to simply make them share a spot on the podium instead. In 2017, a PCGS graded MS67 red example of the 1992 close AM penny was sold at auction for $25,850. And then, for the proverbial first princess, there can be no better example than the 1992 double-die obverse Lincoln penny. This is also an excellent example of rotated hub doubling with extremely strong doubling displaying on all of the obverse letters, achieving full separation even in some cases. Starting with Liberty, we can clearly see the doubling as it grows stronger towards the letters that are closer to the rim of the coin. This effect is also clear on the date, with the 2 of 1972 doubled to a more dramatic effect than the 1 or the 9 would be. But the letters of In God We Trust leave absolutely no doubt as to the veracity of the doubling on this variety coin, with each single letter doubled towards the left and achieving complete separation on every account as well. One of the undisputed superstars of the series, a coin like this was sold at auction in 2019, housed in a PCGS slab with the grade of MS67 plus red for $14,400. And if the previous coin was a superstar, then the coin in the number 1 slot is an unstoppable force of nature. The 1969 S double-die obverse Lincoln penny needs little to no introduction to collectors. The doubling on this coin is so strong that it can easily be spotted by the naked eye with little to no effort. Strong class 1 doubling that is seen on all of the obverse design elements, with the date probably being the hallmark of this particular coin. But the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust are all doubled extremely strongly as well. This is one of the most enduringly popular coins in the series and is so sought after by variety specialists and series collectors alike. And the best part of it is that there are multiple stories about this particular coin being discovered in unsearched coin rolls and even penny jars alike. In 2018, a PCGS graded MS64 red example was sold at auction for the phenomenal price. It is a very attractive but little discussed repunched mint mark variety from 1928. The 1928 S over S coin is marred by its exclusion from the popular Cherry Picker's Guide, despite its inclusion in Konicker's Top 100 list, and as a result, PCGS does not recognize this variety as of yet, even though NGC and Anox will gladly attribute the coin for you. The final placement is southeast of the initial punching, resulting in a very nice doubling of the upper curl of the S towards the northwest, as seen here, as well as the same effect on the lower serif of the S as well. This coin would gladly sell for anywhere between $50 and $300 depending on the grade of the individual coin in question. Then another repunched mint mark variety, but this time it stems from the Denver Mint in the 1927 D over D variety. Here the D mint mark is placed directly north, creating a rather unmistakable effect towards the top of the mint mark, as well as doubling towards the lower serif. An interesting anomaly on this coin as well is some slight doubling that can be seen on Lincoln's eye as well, just towards the right of the lower eyelid. In late 2019, during a rare coin auction in the Bellagio in Las Vegas, a PCGS graded MS64 red-brown example of this variety was sold for $1,175 at auction. For the next coin, we head to 1925, and the first and probably the least spectacular double die variety, if I'm being completely honest. This is, however, a very nice example of Class 6, or the standard hub doubling, which can be quite easy to miss if you are not paying close enough attention or simply don't know what to look for, as most of the doubling simply displays as nothing more than extreme additional thickness on the letters. And the most noticeable place to spot this variety would be on the date itself, especially on the tail end of the 9, or the lower halves of the 2 and the 5 of 1925. In 2016 though, a PCGS graded MS65 brown example of this type was sold at auction for $1,116. And lucky number 7 is the 1927 double die obverse Lincoln Cent. Here we have some moderate doubling to the obverse as a result of Class 1 hub doubling with a slight clockwise rotation. The result is seen on the first few letters of Liberty and the last several numbers on the date. However, the best place to identify this variety will be on the letters of In God We Trust. Here, you can see the doubling towards the left of most all of the letters in question. Later die states for this particular coin do become more difficult to diagnose, so just keep that in mind as well. Quite a popular variety in its own right though. Early in 2020, a PCGS graded MS64 red example was sold at auction for the sum of $1,527. Nearly at the halfway point on this list, and we head to the end of the decade now to find a 1929 S over S repunched mint mark variety. The repunching on the mint mark is fairly straightforward and was punched directly to the south of the initial impression, as that striking was simply too high and thusly too close to the date. The remnant of the first S can now be seen only directly towards the top of the S mint mark. A fun little diagnostic for this variety that can be seen on all examples, but is definitely more visible on some, is a clash mark on the reverse of the self-same mint mark, just under the M of unum and towards the top left of the right wheat stalk. This is actually quite a difficult variety coin to track down, and in 2019 a PCGS graded MS65 red example was sold at auction for $1,821. And then from there, again to 1925, where we have almost the exact opposite of the coin from the listing before. This is again an S over S repunched mint mark, but this time the second impression was placed towards the north, with the first mint mark being simply too low instead. What's left of the initial striking can be detected directly towards the south of the final S mint mark, and judging from how bold the remaining elements of the S in fact are, it must have been quite a strong impression to begin with. Again, a fairly popular variety, and in March of 2018 a PCGS graded MS64 red example was sold at auction for the next penny variety is one from 1928 and is not a double die or a repunched mint mark as you might have come to expect, but rather is the 1928 large S variety. That's right, the S mint mark on this coin is of a distinctly different style than the one that was usually in use. As the name implies, the S is significantly larger than the S on the normal or the small s coin. The easiest way to spot this, if you don't have another coin to compare it to, is to look towards the serifs of the PCGS that are shaped very differently from the normal small s mint mark. This is an interesting variety, and more collectors are beginning to pay attention to things like mint mark styles as well. In 2019, a PCGS graded MS65 red example of this type was sold at auction for $5,875. Okay, so I maybe cheated a little bit on this one, where the number 3, 2, and 1 spots are all different coins, but are subtly different varieties of the 1922 penny. You see, in 1922, the economy was struggling, and demand for circulating coins was at a low point for the era. In fact, the only mint striking pennies was Denver, so from that, all 1922 pennies should by rights have a D mint mark. However, some do not, and these are known as the 1922 no D or even weak D coins. Die pair number 3 is what is known as a weak D variety. On this coin, the D mint mark should be all but obliterated, with only the very faintest of outline remaining, positioned just barely south-southwest towards the first 2 in 1922. This obverse should also then be paired with a very badly worn reverse die, as seen here. Even in higher numerical grades, this coin will have almost no details on the wheat stalks and the motto of E pluribus unum, which should barely be legible due to the badly worn die. During 2019, one of these weak D coins was sold at auction in a PCGS slab with a grade of MS63 red brown for $1,320. Then we move on to die pair number 1. This coin should have no trace of the D mint mark whatsoever, whether due to a filled die cavity, wear or abrasion, or a bizarre combination of the lot. This is the 1922 no D variety. The major distinction between this and the next coin on this list is that it still shares the same worn reverse die marriage as the previous coin, which is why it is also called the no D weak reverse 1922 cent. For this type, a PCGS graded MS64 red example was sold in 2019 for $22,800. And then we have die pair number 2 for the 1922 no D penny. On this coin, we have an obverse that has absolutely no trace of any D mint mark, a die that was obviously polished and sharpened in places, most noticeably on the Lost 2 of 1922. And this is all paired with a clearly fresh and crisp new reverse die, earning it the moniker of the 1922 no D strong reverse cent. This is by far the most desirable of really any of the 1920s variety coins, and is always in high demand in the market. And in 2018, one of these was sold at auction in a PCGS slab with a given grade of MS64 red brown for the sum of $63,000. So those are your top 10 Lincoln penny varieties from 1920 to 1920 coins that were on offer. And let's start off with an interesting Condor token of the New York-based firm of Talbot, Allen and Lee, dated 1795. Now, these were actually minted in Birmingham and intended as store tokens to use to the value of 1 cent each. However, they vastly overestimated the amount of tokens that they would require, and then in 1795 William Talbot sold 52,000 of these tokens to the Philadelphia Mint, who then in turn used them to mint 1795 and 1797 half-cent coins. This is a surviving example at PCGS, graded as MS65 brown and sold at auction for $1,680. Most everyone would be aware of the special circulating bicentennial commemorative coins issued to celebrate the nation's 200th birthday in 1976. However, the mint also issued special collectible medals in both bronze, silver, and gold to celebrate the occasion, with the gold medals of 1976 being available in 3 sizes, of which this was by far the largest at 3 inches in diameter. Of the 423 of these large gold medals that were distributed, with each one being numbered sequentially, this one in fact being number 6 in the sequence, this example was sold at auction for $26,400. It can certainly be said that the Marquis de Lafayette has certainly lived an interesting and eventful life. Born into the French aristocracy, he came to America to fight in the Revolutionary War against the British, becoming close friends with George Washington during that time. He was a participant in pivotal battles such as the Battle of Brandywine, Valley Forge, and indeed the Siege of Yorktown itself, to name but a few. After returning to France, he again played a role in the French Revolution and then much later again in the July Revolution of 1830. But in 1824, he again returned to the United States at the invitation of Congress and President James Monroe. He would eventually tour what were all 24 states at that time, taking nearly a year and a half to do so, receiving literally a hero's welcome absolutely everywhere he went. These counterstruck coins were made as keepsakes for those occasions and were known mainly on large cents, but a few of them were also struck on larger denominations such as this $half coin as well, counterstamped with Washington on one side and Lafayette on the other. This exceptional piece was sold at auction for $26,400. Now, I mentioned that the usual host coin for something like this would have been a large cent, and well, here is just such an example as well. This time counterstamped on an 1822 matron-head large cent. Also, still in an absolutely fantastic condition, which actually reminds me of another bizarre little counterstamped coin. The Vote the Land Free stamped on the obverse of a 1843 seated Liberty Quarter. Now, according to Q. David Bowers in his book More Adventures with Rare Coins, these were actually created by something called the National Reform Association, who advocated giving free land to homesteaders, prohibiting seizure for land as a result of non-payment of debt, and reducing the portion of land owned by the wealthy. Mostly apparently seen on large cents. Again, this quarter is, according to the source literature, apparently unique, and $7,800 was the closing bid for this piece at auction. Probably the most apt description that I can recall ever hearing of the Vermont Republic was as the Reluctant Republic, rebuking British rule and declaring itself as independent in 1777, but not officially joining the Union as the 14th state until 1791. In that 14-year gap, it managed to have a functioning government, operated a postal system, and issued its own coins as well, known today as the Vermont coppers. Now, the design of this later issue coin is obviously derivative of the British halfpenny that was still in circulation at that time, although I've heard it speculated that the image of Britannia is here replaced with a similarly styled depiction of Ceres instead, the Roman goddess of agriculture and fertility. Obviously, though, a not entirely so subtle ploy to ensure that the coin would be viable outside of this state as well. This is a so-called baby head Vermont copper variety owing to the infantile appearance of the bust on the obverse of the coin, where the reef's placement was so low that the ribbon appears to be tying a bib around the figure's neck instead. Graded by PCGS as AU53, this historically important coin was sold at auction for $28,800. Another example of a Vermont copper that was on offer was this landscape design example, where the obverse depicts a sunrise over the Green Mountains and a plow in the foreground. The inscription translates as Vermont Republic. Meanwhile, the reverse is almost a complete copy of the Nova Constellatio coins, complete with 13 stars, and interestingly, the inscription of Stella Quartadecima translates as the 14th star, a clear allusion to the state's bid for admission to the Union as the 14th state. Authenticated by PCGS as XF40, this coin sold for $14,400. And if you like error coins, then you are going to absolutely love this specimen. A Lincoln cent overstruck on a Sacagawea dollar coin, creating a double denomination of $1 and 1 cent. Now, I won't go into too much detail about this coin here, as I've already made a dedicated video about it that you can watch now by clicking on the little eye in the top right hand side of your screen if you like. Suffice to say, graded by PCGS as MS66, the coin sold at auction for $38,400. The first 2 decades of the 20th century did not only represent a renaissance period for American numismatics, but was also the closing years of a greater, overarching renaissance of American art and architecture as well. Few artists managed to embody this period in a more enduring fashion than Augustus St. Gaudens, who of course also designed our beloved St. Gaudens double eagle. Borrowing from his earlier work, the obverse is in fact an adaptation of his marching victory, or the winged Nike figure, which today stands at the Sherman Memorial in Manhattan. This is the wire rim variety of that 1907 high relief coin, still retaining the original Roman numerals before they were replaced with the more familiar Hindu-Arabic numerals. Graded by PCGS as MS66+, this legendary, other prime example of these Renaissance-era coins are the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition commemorative coins, designed by Robert Atkins, who is perhaps best remembered for designing the west pediment of the Supreme Court building in Washington. The look and especially the feel of these octagonal $50 coins harken back to antiquity, especially predominant issues of ancient Greece and Athena in particular. As the exposition was held in San Francisco, the obverse echoes that state seal with the image of the goddess Minerva wearing a crested Corinthian helm pushed back to symbolize peaceful intent. Minerva, or her Greek counterpart Athena, was often used throughout Western history to symbolize wisdom, skillful contemplation, peace, and democracy itself. The reverse depicts an owl, also a symbol of wisdom, resting on a nestle of Penderosa pine, with the dolphins around the border symbolizing the now seamless ocean route made possible by the opening of the Panama Canal. Graded as MS64 by PCGS, this coin sold at auction for $90,000. The 1823, or more technically the 1823 over 2 capped bust quarter dollar, is a coin that is deceptive in so many ways on the surface of it. For one thing, the overdate variety is not actually a variety at all, as every known example of an 1823 quarter dollar is known with the overdate type, and it was likely the only dies used for this type in that year, which then leads us directly into the mintage figure. The stated and accepted mintage figure is 17,800 coins, and has been such ever since, well, at least Montrevel Dickinson wrote his American Numismatic Manual in 1859. The problem, however, with that, as we know today, is that those numbers include all of the coins delivered in that calendar year of 1823, which also includes coins dated and even minted in 1822. Seeing as how only around 35 coins are left surviving today, that number does seem a bit optimistic, and the actual amount of 1823 coins struck was likely just a mere fraction of that. This beautiful example was graded by PCGS as XF45 and sold at auction here for $102,000.